Hello and welcome to Plus One to Gaming. I'm Chris.
And I'm Eric.
And today we are going to go into some speculation on D&D 6e, which probably not an official term, but that's the news. Wizards has announced that Dungeons and Dragons is getting a rules overhaul in 2024. So we thought it'd be fun to just kind of guess and speculate, maybe put out our wishful thoughts, our positive energies on what an evolution of D&D and specifically D&D 5e would look like. So Eric, given, if you had a magic wand and you could alter 5e into any beast you choose, how would you start adjusting it? Or what would you look for in a new system? What would excite you?
I think that one of the easiest things to change that I know the fan base has been asking for a long time, that actually might be a little bit of like a weirdly hot topic, is to change everything to the metric system.
Interesting. Do tell.
So there's just a lot. I believe that I don't have any examples, so this might be not a great example. But I believe that the core rule book kind of jumps between measuring systems. So there's some that's imperial, there's some that's metric, there's some that's like a mixture of. A lot of the things that I've read is just change everything to the metric system. It also could be an interesting way for like young kids and Americans to actually learn the metric system.
What a novel idea.
Yeah, we'll be somewhere. I'll be watching like a TV show and they're going 60 kilometers an hour. And I'm like, that means nothing to me. I don't know if that is fast, if that is, I have no clue. I have no reference for this. So I think that could be a simple change that, I mean, obviously it's not like an interesting change or like a core rulebooks level change. But the first thing, step one, change everything to metric.
Yeah, well, it's a simple consistency or maybe even like quality of life type of thing, especially if you're a European player or anywhere else aside from the United States. That could be helpful. I could see that.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers of like player base and demographics or geographics or anything like that, but I would have to imagine the United States is the only like one of 3 countries in the world that uses imperial system. The player base outside of here has to be substantial enough to make it matter, to make it easy.
One would hope. All right, so that's some quality of life things. What about like actual game mechanics? Where would you start tinkering if you could? If you were a game developer at Wizards, what would you be working on?
See, I would say this is not my forte, to be honest. I don't know what I would change. Some of it, there's a pretty high like barrier to entry on a lot of stuff, and I know that they addressed that with 5e. That was like part of the goal is to make it more accessible. I would say that they succeeded, but I would bet they could go a little farther. There's a lot of like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of redundancy, at least like spell wise. I wouldn't want them to like take spells away, but there's a lot of spells that do kind of like very, very similar things. There's a lot of spells that are just named weird. I mean, the classic example is what is it, like Ice Touch, Frosty Touch with Cold Touch? What's that
Chill
spell
Touch?
Called? Chill Touch. I went through every synonym of it, which is neither touching nor cold. It's like necrotic. Like, again, it's not a huge overhaul, but like I think streamlining some things, cleaning up some things, because it's just, I don't know. I think of D&D and I think of a lot of things. I know we talked about like my Pandora playlist as like making a samurai sword. Like they're throwing in a bunch of steel and now we have to hammer out like the carbon or however you make samurai swords. We've thrown in a bunch of stuff over the past however many years 5e's been out. And it's gotten maybe a little bloated. I would maybe like to see a more streamlined version of it.
That could be interesting because coming from short-lived 4E, which I don't think we ever played as
No.
a friend group, but I have played 4E, and even the Acquisitions Inc. podcast started off on the 4E system.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I believe they were doing some promotional stuff with Wizards at the time, or maybe they just wanted to play it. I can't remember. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, they started off on 4E because that was the new thing. It was you went from 3.5E and like what you play Dungeons and Dragons, nerd.
Yeah.
So 4E was a very simplified, almost arcade or video game like engine. Your character didn't have a lot. You just didn't have a whole lot of like customization for your character, and it was just kind of spam these few abilities over and over again. And they quickly evolved, kind of maybe taking a step backwards, not in a bad way, but looking at the rules and bringing in more customization into 5E and just more depth to the character building process and the things that you can do with your class and race, etc. Just more options. But in terms of making it more accessible, I wonder if there's a balance point between those two systems that gets the rules a little bit more out of the way, while not feeling so oversimplified that you're just an avatar and you're spamming these abilities to get through the game.
Yeah, and I think that's what 5e is supposed to be, like the balance point. Now, whether or not they feel like they nailed it, or if they nailed it, who knows? So this might be a course correction in one way or another. I mean, it could be the opposite of what I'm saying. It could be more rules heavy. It could be more in depth. Maybe they're finding that their player base wants that. I would doubt, as a business, like thinking as a business, you want your target market to be the majority of people, not the really like core players. So core players oftentimes are disappointed with changes like this, or with any like video game, I would say, because it doesn't normally target them.
Yeah.
If you're core player, you're real like rules lawyer, you're real nerd, quote unquote, whatever. That's like 10% maybe.
Yeah. So let's put it this way: if you like Morrowind over Skyrim, you're a core player. You like the in-depth character building, the skill assessment, the skill allocations, and you're really paying attention to everything. Whereas like Skyrim is the most distilled version of the Elder Scrolls series. Everything that that I think made the Elder Scrolls so cool early on kind of got watered out.
Yeah. So a perfect example. The core player, the people who really enjoyed that were not the new target market. You want to broaden. You always want to broaden your market. And Dungeons and Dragons Wizards, I guess, was super successful with that with 5e, because 5e was a simplification, a streamline, made it more popular. So I don't know. They might be going more in that direction. I would bet that at least a good amount of it is something to make it more digestible for the average non-player. You already have your players.
Yeah. You've got your core fan base is not going away, more or less. Like when Bethesda watered down Skyrim, like the mechanics, I still play it and I still love it. I play it more.
Yeah.
I've probably logged more hours in Skyrim than I have in Morrowind at this point. That's fine. Yeah. I think some of my predictions for an evolution, I mean, exactly what you said, streamlining a lot of the rules. I think we're going to see more maybe mechanics for collaborative storytelling, for facilitating that, and for more agency. Similar, I think, kind of like similar to how we play our games, where we kind of make some things up on the fly and maybe even make up some mechanics on the fly to facilitate the role-playing experiences. And giving more structure to that for players to roll into their games would be really cool. I also wonder if we're going to see just complete departures in adopting new systems. Like Powered by the Apocalypse has some really cool mechanics that you can use for storytelling. That's kind of what I'm referring to, is like using those mechanics. And maybe even a way to run DM-less. Like it's interesting. It's a fun role to play,
Yeah.
But they're also, I know Wizards is experimenting with different like delivery vehicles for the Dungeons and Dragons experience.
Yeah.
You know, if you go into a hobby shop, you see there's so much D&D merchandise,
Mhm.
and they're expanding into just digital areas and trying to bring those the connective tissues together.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm hoping this isn't the case, but if it's integrated with like D&D Beyond,
Yeah.
where there's going to be this giant paywall in front of everything, which that would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, again, though, thinking about like as a business, I mean, because Wizards isn't who's Wizards owned by Hasbro?
they're owned by Hasbro now. Yeah.
Yeah, like Hasbro wants every one of its subsidiaries to be profitable, and like Wizards has been doing really well in the past 5 years, 6 years, whatever it's been. A lot of it, I would assume, is due to like the popularity of Critical Role and different things like that. Twitch streaming has done a lot of like really good free advertising for D&D.
Not to mention Stranger Things and other pop culture phenomenons.
It's kind of back in the pop culture. 5e has made it more accessible for the average person. I mean, even us, like I had wanted to play D&D for a long time, and we didn't truly start playing until 5e. We played a little bit of 3.5 years ago, probably 10 years ago. But we didn't really start playing until 5e made it very, the entry wall was pretty low.
Yeah.
So, but as an organization, I would expect that they are looking for some synergies like that. It's interesting you brought up like a DM-less mode of play, because I feel like most groups, that's the hardest role to fill.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who are like, I want to play, but I've never been able to find a group. And really what they mean is I've never been able to find a DM. So that's an interesting zig that I wouldn't have expected when I would expect them to zag, but it makes sense.
Well, like imagine if, you and I were hanging out, or maybe it was you, me, and Billy, and we wanted to play, but we just didn't have that. You just need that fourth person as an example, or, you've got a group of people, but nobody has the desire or experience to DM. What if you could play some kind of directed adventure, with just like, maybe it's through cards, or maybe they have just a different
so that's
product to
that's
deliver.
what I was thinking. They like making cards. We've seen a lot of like spell cards, different things. That's also a revenue source. That would be interesting to see. I'm trying to think of like the mechanics of it. It wouldn't probably be too difficult. It's kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to a new engine that even like as you're playing, what if you found something and you have cards that have like unique abilities that you can do, like single resource items. Sometimes you find a magic wand.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just some stuff like that. I like tangible rewards sometimes. It's fun.
So the Witchlight Carnival, what is the name of this book? Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So the Wild Beyond the Witchlight adventure also has a companion D&D accessories package that comes with some dice. It looks like it comes with a map that's like kind of cool. And it comes with some cards. So I don't know, but I would bet that at least part of the rework is potentially making D&D more board game like. The board game industry is huge right now and is more than likely, I don't know, again, I don't have data, but probably bigger during the pandemic because you couldn't do anything. Probably shouldn't have had friends over to your house playing board games, but it's not like you could go out and do, all the stuff you were doing before. So the at-home entertainment industries have all had like watershed years. Wizards included. I think 2020 was their like highest revenue year ever. So I wonder if part of the 5.5e is making it more board game like.
Yeah. And so that excites me and scares me at the same time. It excites me because, it's back to our, discussions about running DM-less campaigns. Maybe having those types of structures
Yeah.
removes the need for the DM if you've got, you know, board game type of layout. But
Yeah.
that's also kind of scary too, because, you know, what if you're playing, like we play on Roll20 because we live in 4 different states, or you're just averse to buying stuff. Maybe it's just not within your budget.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping there's still ways to enjoy. I want to get this book. I'm going to order it to read it so we can talk about it and review it. But I'm curious if you can play this without having to purchase all of that companion stuff.
I mean, I would assume so.
Yeah.
This thing doesn't let me see what like the cards are, and dice. Like again, we don't need like dice, whatever.
Yeah.
Maps the same. Like it is weird to me that a lot of like the books that we buy don't come with these big maps. Like Skyrim, and we talked about Skyrim a lot. Skyrim came with a big map. Like I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to spend $30 extra for a map, cards, and dice.
Yeah. But I guess it's just like at the same time, if you want to keep the cost low for the book first,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't know. I guess I would prefer just like, for me, I don't really, that stuff's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit of a minimalist. This is anecdotal purely, but I don't want all that other shit right now. There was a place in time where I did, though. There was a place in time when I would love that.
Yes, I agree. I still have a giant bag of dice that we play digitally now, so we never use. But
yeah,
I don't think, I don't know, because they've done stuff similar to this before, where they've released like packages that go kind of along with it. Again, I don't know what these cards are in this. 19 double-sided cards with descriptions and illustrations of characters, creatures, games, and other features in the Witchlight Carnival. So
yeah, okay, it's kind of about what we talked about before of just bringing some of those DM materials to cards. I mean, it's like when you buy spell cards or
exactly.
This is same our monster cards, same thing.
Yes. So that again is pretty par for the course for Wizards, and I don't think would necessitate a rule version update. So I'm wondering, like, if they're going to start doing this more often, which revenue-wise makes sense. Cards are cheap to print, and people will pay $30 for a map.
Yeah,
and cards, and
low
dice.
margin.
Yes,
or I'm sorry, high margin, low overhead. Products.
So I mean, even just in Amazon, they've got like Rime of the Frost Maiden, blue dice, $22. So they do this stuff. That's fine. They're a business. That I don't think necessitates a world or a version change. But if they were thinking of making it more board game-esque, board game friendly, that could.
Yeah, I think diving in a little deeper there, a D&D 5.5 that opens up more opportunities for merchandising products and bringing that into the world does make sense from a business perspective, and doesn't adjust the game so much where you can't border 5 or 5.5, if that's what it's actually going to look like. I don't know.
Yep.
But it's an interesting thing to think about. I'm even more curious now. But it's neat because there are just so many opportunities to take the game in new directions. And I think that would be a really fun one, is if you could offer different ways to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a meaningful change.
Interesting. Yeah, so I was reading on one of the articles about this update, and it said that Wizards is going to reveal player surveys. They'll be distributed in 2022.
Yeah.
In order to give players a say about what they want out of the new rule changes. So that's kind of interesting, because I'd be willing to bet. So this kind of goes against my previous point, but I'd be willing to bet the people that answer that are only going to be the core players.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Well,
first of all, people who aren't playing, people who aren't playing aren't going to get this and answer it. So it's already just your player base, and then, I mean, I imagine there will be questions in there to kind of figure out how how long you've been playing, what's your style, these types of things.
I'm gonna kind of invoke your earlier point that Wizards is a subsidiary of Hasbro now, and Hasbro is an established corporation with a in-house marketing team.
Yeah.
That survey is really going to only be as good as their marketing efforts.
Of course.
Just being a marketer, you have to be very proactive in getting a sample base large enough that's going to give you a good perspective of who you're serving. So I feel like, is it going to be the most vocalized players who are going to be doing this, or is the company doing its due diligence to source a wider range of information? And from what I've heard of Wizards playtesting and what they do, when they're developing rule sets and game sets, and they have so much experience at this with Magic the Gathering as one example. I trust that they are putting a lot of time and effort into building this, and I'm gonna just be open and saying that I think it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Because 5e itself has we've said this, you've said this specifically, it's a hell of a drug. And so this new version, if it's going in with the intention to overhaul, which is a nice, instead of like a new rule set, I think an overhaul is maybe more exciting, because I like 5e. I don't necessarily want 5e to go away.
Yeah, that is, I'm trying to come at it with a positive mindset in the same way, because I really do like 5e. I'm used to it. I know the mechanics fairly well. It's easy enough. I think it is that, like, it's a very good balance. It might not be perfect, but I think it's a good balance of, like, a lot of rules, a lot of stuff, but relatively easy to digest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know there was like rumblings of and it may have been this that we were kind of hearing about, but there were rumblings, like, I think last year, that they were looking to make the next version, like D&D 6, and I wasn't excited about it. But a D&D like 5e.5 or 5.5e, however you would do it, that I'm into.
It does strike a good balance. It might not be the best game system out there, but the other positive is there are so many game systems out there that will fit your particular style of play if it's not D&D. I think that just D&D 5e specifically gives you a very solid, flexible framework. And of course, you can always build on it and modify it. But I'm really excited to see what this new version will entail. Another thing that we forgot to mention is that they are, at least the word on the street is that this overhauled edition is still going to be 5e compatible.
Yeah.
Which I think is really fun, because...
So that's kind of, I feel like, the difference between going from a 3.5 to a 4 to a 5, or apparently this happened in D&D 3. It got a 3.5 update, and everything was still backwards compatible. So that's the difference, I guess, between making like a whole new version and an update. So that's exciting. That makes me way less nervous about it.
Yeah, because it's we had a friend I was playing with when I lived in Vermont, and he wanted to run the Salt Marshes campaign.
I
think maybe it's like the Ghosts of Salt Marsh.
Ghosts of Salt Marsh.
Yeah, which was a very old campaign. I think it was the first campaign that was written by the European TSR team, which I think was one guy, maybe. But essentially, it was like the first, UK or campaign that was made outside of the US, and it was really fun. But he had to go in and convert it to 5e because at the time that module wasn't released. It was kind of ironic. Maybe a year or two later, they actually did release a 5e version of that, which I think we should play because it was hella fun when we played it before. But it was a lot of work for him to do that. I looked at he showed me some of the original material. Yeah. And it was all Greek to me. I did not understand it.
I have some of the old rule books from 2 and 3.5 even, but I have some from like the 70s and 80s, and looking through it, it is like, I felt like, oh, this is that. Looking through it, it was it was like reading a different language or like a code book.
Yeah, and also, so when I first started to try to play D&D, it was on 4E, and I was, reading the rules and trying to figure out how do I play the game.
Yeah,
And even with that, I just remember feeling very overwhelmed because there was just so much, especially because I wanted to play, so I had to be the DM for our perspective table.
Yep.
And I think I just quit because it was too much for me at the time to really comprehend and bring it all together, especially amongst, like, everyone was new. Everyone was completely fresh to this concept. So I just gave up.
Yeah, and I think so that's kind of the barrier to entry that I keep talking about. Like, people who are interested in this, it's in the zeitgeist. It's, Stranger Things season 3 is coming out. Like, there's a bunch of things that are piquing people's interest. We've heard about this game since we were kids. So finally, somebody every day is going to be like, okay, I want to try it. They get, the core rule books or whatever. They go online, they watch some things, and it is, even 5e is like fairly complicated. Now, I feel like, there's a lot.
You look at the DM book, the Dungeon Master's Guide alone, and that's a hefty volume. And if you're DMing, you need to read that. You need to read the player's handbook, and you need to be browsing
and have the monster manual. Yeah. So that's kind of the, I don't know, where I thought that they would try to simplify it, because like they've only added more books, so now it's not even, you can play obviously with just those 3. You could get the starter set, which they've done things to try to make it easier to come in, but even the starter set was fairly complicated. We played through it and had a blast, and I like the adventure, but there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and it's a big adventure.
We skipped things too. There were things in there we didn't do. So the last thing I really want them to do is streamline adventures and make them kind of easier to consume. But even in every single adventure we've ever played, we've missed tons of stuff. That's just kind of by design, because we zigged when we should have zagged, or zagged when we should have zigged, or whatever. And that's kind of the fun of it. Let's say, Strahd, you get the Strahd book. It's a thick book. The DM reads through the whole thing, and the players do 40% of it. That's a lot of wasted time and effort on the DM's part. So I don't know how to solve that, but I would imagine that that's one of the issues they're looking at. There are a lot of people who want to play this game but are turned off by the complexity.
Yeah, I really am curious how, with an overhaul of 5e, as assuming that it's going to be maybe serve more or less as the skeleton for what the new version will look like.
Yeah.
I am really curious, in what ways can you make it more accessible? Because from a player standpoint, I think you really could streamline some of the ability score stuff.
Yeah.
I think the racial traits really help make the characters. It helps give another distinction point.
Mm-hmm.
With the classes, it is nice having all of these options and very unique flavors of those classes. But I also wonder too if, kind of like in the Skyrim model, you can just kind of do whatever, and if you do more of that thing, you get better at it. So I don't know if maybe there's going to be something more flexible in terms of your class or role choice or character building. Tasha's introduced some mechanics, or a lot of mechanics, for custom and homebrewing stuff.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there will be just more open-endedness from that aspect in a new version, if that's the way they went with 5e, sort of at the, I guess we're kind of nearing at the end of its life cycle.
So one thing I read said this is, again, the word they're using is 5.5, similar to 3.5.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere that they're saying it's the middle of its life, not the end of 5e's life cycle, but it's the middle of 5's life cycle.
That would make sense, because I feel like there's still a lot of merchandising they can do to milk this cash cow all the way home.
Oh yeah.
In a 5e or 5.5e, if the intention is to make it backwards compatible, enables them to continue selling all that other merchandise and still like making money off of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And at 5e came out in 2014.
Yeah, it did, didn't
So
it? That's not that old.
I just looked it up.
7
You think
years.
that's not that old? I think that's crazy old.
7 years. People are still playing World of Warcraft.
Yeah, and World of Warcraft gets updates all the time. I mean, and
Well, so is 5e.
so is 5e. So that's, again, it's kind of the, I don't know. I'm interested to see what they do, because it's not the way that, like, I feel like every book that comes out, I mean, like you mentioned Tasha's with the like character building change, like that's a huge change to the game. I feel like a lot of the books that come out change the game pretty significantly. I'm
There's some
excited to see what they are brewing that would necessitate like an entire version change.
Exactly. Because like you look at some of the big milestones throughout 5e. One of them was Volos being able to, I can play as a monster now.
Yeah.
That was a really cool one. Xanathar's, I think, brought some cool stuff, and of course Tasha's like completely, I won't say upended the game. Maybe I'll say opened the game by giving players and DMs all of these tools and frameworks to easily create whatever the hell they want. At that point, though, yeah, I think maybe it's from the campaign and storytelling perspectives that might shift, like how those things are run. The only other things I can think of are just like the actual core mechanics. You know, the D20 is definitely not going away.
Yeah.
So I wonder what resolving things is going to look like, or like how those maybe the calculations that we use are going to get more simplified. That would be nice.
That would be nice. Yeah, I agree with you that the like character creation could be simplified. I don't know how, obviously. But every time, and we've been making a lot of characters recently and like actually building out the sheets instead of just like, oh, well, this would be fun. And every time I have to be like, fuck, how do I get this? What is this again? It's not intuitive at all.
Well, it's also, yeah, I mean, those are like the mechanical stuff, and it's not as fun as the traits and the bonds and flaws and the equipment and some of that other more colorful stuff. There is, so that folklore system that we dabbled with and some others have a unique way that I really like it to kind of, I guess, like a different approach to the character sheet.
Yeah.
It's using like traits and characteristics, and by putting those on your character sheet, those just add to your pool of potential success for a particular task or action or something. So an example would be like, okay, my character is charming, and that's just a characteristic that he has. And you get, because this is a role-playing game, you can kind of weight that in terms of ability. So maybe I have like a +3 charisma or +3 charming. And anytime I'm trying to, I want to try and persuade this person by being charming, you just get to add that trait to your roll with any other maybe bonuses that you get, and you just help improve your success of probability, or your chance of success, just like we do in D&D, but it's just a more streamlined version. And you can just get, based on the character you're building, you just get to pick that. It doesn't necessarily have to be limited by, you're a ranger class, so you can't be good at investigation or arcana. Like, that's dumb. Why can't they if I want that?
And I don't know, because like the character sheet is indicative of Dungeons and Dragons, like, and the stat array and all of that. I don't know if they would go as far as to like have it as open-ended as some of those other games that we've played.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would like to see a simplified version of the character sheet. Again, even as somebody who's made dozens of them, every time I have to like, what is this again? Like, I don't know. It's not the fun part for me. I love making characters. I hate making character sheets.
Yeah, it's
like actually going through and hammering out like the nuts and bolts of the character sheet every time. And then I feel like I have to have like Billy check my homework. I'm like, did I do this right?
Yeah.
Because I want to do like creative stuff sometimes. And the characters we've been making recently are relatively simple because they're low level, but like I want to have an interesting character. I want to do interesting stuff. And mechanically sometimes like I'll read through the book. I'm like, okay, cool. That makes sense. This works. Blah, 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 blah. and I'll get to like the pen and paper part of it, and I'm like, shit, where do I put this? How does this work? I feel like it's weird to say, but I feel like the character sheet is like it has not evolved with the rest of the game. And there's a ton of ones out there you can download where people have made like new versions of them and this and that, and like they're cool too. But I don't know. We've even tried it, making new character sheets. I don't know if there's one out there that makes it like a simple to create a new character and has like space for all the stuff. Because even now that we're doing it digitally, like I want to put all my feats in there so I remember I have them. I want to put all my features, all my, and there's a spot for like feats and features, but I can't fit, even at level 4, I can't fit everything in there.
Yeah, especially if you want to include what it does so you don't have to refer to the handbook.
Yeah, I've had to just stop doing that. I just put the name in and then I can like, oh, well, I have this and I have to look it up.
Right.
Because again, like, there's just so much stuff that they've added, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. There's so much options to choose from. I'm never going to remember what this one specific thing does because I've never, I want to play a new class. I want to play a new interesting thing. And it just gets kind of tough to memorize all of it. And then there's not a good way to showcase that on the character sheet. So I don't know. I would hope that they would do a new character sheet.
I have not. I've also looked as well. I've tried to create my own as well. I've yet to find a character sheet model that has blown me away. Pretty close to a couple that have looked nice, but I would love to see a character sheet that actually helps guide, especially like newer players, that helps you make sense of and create a character quickly. I think D&D Beyond kind of bridges that gap as an online portal since they booted off OrcPub. Can we pour one off for OrcPub real quick?
Yeah, I think I don't want to blow them up, but there's something that's very similar to them that I found recently.
A pivot.
But that's the thing. So like we're talking about them as a business. So they want to control the narrative. They want to control all of the stuff. They want D&D online. I'm surprised Roll20 is still out there and they haven't made something as a direct competitor to it. But I mean, they very easily could have on their like official, because they have Wizards of the Coast official character sheets. Like, go to this website for like an in-depth guide on how to fill out the character sheet or something like that. Because sometimes like I'll have to look online and like watch a YouTube for something that's like, especially if it's like kind of like really specific and detailed. I'm like, how do I do this?
Well, I guess we should make our own videos.
We should, to be honest. I am a little blown away so D&D has a couple podcasts. They have a couple streams and different things like that. They have some stuff on YouTube. They oftentimes are like the 4th or 5th most popular. Like it's weird to me that like if you're looking for something, normally I would think like go to the source. And I don't think they've done, I don't know if they haven't focused on it often enough or put enough resources into it, but like a lot of mom and pop channels are exponentially more successful and by view count and subscriber than the official Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I wonder if it could be something by choice. It's weird for this particular type of product because generally you'd prefer other people talk, like your affiliates, and you can have affiliate programs and make money off of that as a side revenues. And maybe that's what it is. It's harder to compete with those when you are the brand to say that our brand is great and these are all these great things about it. Or it could be just a conscious choice like, oh, no, we need to focus on PR and attracting new audiences, and we don't really care as much about creating resources to get them onboarded to the game.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe because even like they're just general like talking about the game, which I would assume is PR. Yeah. Like they'll have some of like the head writers on or whatever, and it just doesn't. I don't know. They don't do as well as I would expect them to do.
Yeah, and it might be just that thing like people prefer, even though it's Wizards and people do love Wizards. Yeah, like it's still marketing, it's still promotion, it's still sales, and people might be just a little more reticent to tune into that.
Yeah, maybe because I typically am a little allergic to that stuff.
I'm highly allergic generally because I am a marketer.
Yeah, but like I sought out some like Wizards podcasts and stuff because like I was like I want to listen to especially like the lore.
Uh-huh.
Like I want to learn more about the like deep lore of the world and stuff. And they have that podcast. It is like a segment in a longer podcast, and it wasn't like super popular. I don't know, I was really surprised. So I
Oh, you know what? I think what it is, like the crux of that issue is when you've got like Joe Smith at home who's got tons of time to dive balls deep into a topic like lore, he's just going to do that, and he's going to do it because he's excited and passionate about it. When you've got like a Wizards employee who they've been asked to do this podcast and it's not part of their job and it's not part of their general like business strategy to create the resources for deep lore and stuff, I could see like how this situation would come how it would come to fruition, I guess. Just understanding a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, but so see, here's the deal, man. You hire that other guy.
Well, but Wizards is a small team. It's not. They're not. Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough balance to justify that additional resource. There's one thing I did want to kind of circle back on in terms of like streamlining things.
Yeah.
Especially with regards to characters. I feel like there's a ton of features, abilities, traits, both from like the backgrounds you can choose, from the races you choose, or even the class. Like if you're a ranger and you can't ever get lost, like how often does that ever come up in games? Where you can forage for food and stuff. There's just like these weird little things that sound really cool, but don't really get a lot of action in the game. And pretty much everything that's useful is generally, broad sweeping strokes here, combat focused.
Yeah.
Not always, but that tends to where it leads, which is a hallmark of its tactical war game origin.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we're going to see a shift maybe more towards tactical or more towards collaborative storytelling and like, that end. I'm kind of curious where that push and pull will be, but how they handle a lot of those just different features, like how I'm craving maybe a different expression of those that is more impactful in game, because some of them are really great, but most of them are not.
Yeah, I'll agree to that. There are a lot of those background traits, and like specifically I think the background traits, like if you go into different backgrounds, like I'll look through and I'm like, I mean, my character is like, this is their background, so I'll pick it, but I have no clue how I'm going to use this feature. And like maybe once you can shoehorn it into a game if you're specifically trying to. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's like, I don't know, because that stuff's out there and like it's in 5e, so you're not going to be able to cut the fat because it's already there. And they can't just say, like, you remember all those things? Ignore them, because they're still in the books.
Yeah.
And if we're not switching to D&D 6, then we still have the books.
Yeah. Is it going to introduce more, like, advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where it's just like, we're going to, kind of to your point before, like, are we going to make it more complicated I don't know.
Yeah, like, now that we've kind of talked through it, again, I'm not a game designer, so I don't know how they would do this, but like simplifying the game would be tough because all of the things that made the game complicated are still out there and we're still in that rule set.
Yeah. And how do you reconcile that?
Exactly. I don't know how you would like take things away. So I imagine they're adding things. I would be more willing to think that it's like kind of to your point now, maybe look for different ways to play the game. I would say probably some other tools and like cards. Again, Wizards loves cards because that could potentially simplify it a little bit if you have like decks of cards that can do some things, but it's also another revenue source for them.
Yeah, I think a DM list option could give you some like new tools and rules to use, still play together, and then have maybe some kind of either book or pamphlet or cards or even an online digital like a digital DM would be kind of cool. Like if you could set up like a laptop or an iPad or something, and it's almost like a sort of choose your own adventure style that you play.
Yeah,
that could be interesting.
That would be interesting. I doubt that they would do that.
Yeah, but it's always fun to dream.
Yeah. but it's interesting.
I wanted to do because there's not really a lot. There's only one instance of this that I know of, the Skyrim Very Special Edition that you can play on like Alexa or like voice automated or AI type platforms.
Yeah.
I was talking to some of the software engineers at work. Like, have you guys dabbled in this? What would it take to create some kind of like audio, like not text based, but like voice based adventuring game? I thought that would be so fun to tinker around with.
That could be really cool. And we're in the age that like somebody's messing around with something like that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we have the technology.
Yeah. Well,
we just need to like apply it in this.
I really enjoyed those.
Zone.
It'd be fun to play with. I miss my text-based RPG mud days. And that could be a fun way to try and pull on some of those nostalgic strings. I always think back to that Strong Bad video.
Oh, yeah.
You try and get the cup, but all you have to do is think about why you can't get the cup.
It's never end of the text-based games.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that actually is a good stopping point because we've speculated as much as we can, I think, about what a new version of D&D or an overhaul would look like. Do you have any last thoughts?
I don't think I do. No, I mean, well, yeah, I would say... I know, I always say like, no, but here's something. I'm excited that they're giving out the survey. I would hope that a large amount of the player base actually fills it out so that it's not just the vocal minority.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope for more like we talked about, more role playing, more like out of combat focused things. But I would be happy if they put in some kind of combat focused stuff because maybe it makes combat spicier and more fun.
Yeah, or if they streamlined
we've talked about exactly. We didn't actually go over this in this conversation, but we've talked about streamlining combat before, and like how to do it, how to make it interesting, how to make it fun. That could be. I would be into that too.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, that's it for our discussion today on what D&D overhaul would look like in 2024. We hope you enjoyed. We'd love to hear your thoughts about what you want from an overhaul in this game. Check us out at plus1togaming.com to subscribe and get updates delivered straight to your inbox. Never spam. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.